Just before we get started, thank you IGM for sponsoring this space and pizza and pop. Thank you Marwan from IGM. All right, without further ado, Coach Camp is it's at Kingston, in Kingston, Ontario. Not as fun as Kingston, Jamaica. Speaking of Kingston, Mark Kingston's here today. I thought about that all week. He's here today. He's going to be speaking to us about beyond competition and looking at differentiation as a key factor of competition. Mark mostly comes from the product space in terms of his consulting work. He has intersected Agile because you almost can't avoid it, especially in the product space. And so he had a very interesting talk that he wanted to do here at AgileTO. Without further ado, Mark Kingston. Please give him a round of applause.
Welcome everyone. I'm really glad for the chance to talk to you about increasing the success of your products with differentiation. Probably gonna make you sick of that word by the time we leave here, but it's super important. Thanks to the AgileTO organizers for welcoming me to speak, and thank you all for making the effort to be here on this beautiful summer evening, spring evening. Just to tell you quickly about me, Fahd spoke about it briefly. I'm the founder and principal of Kingston Co. I started out as a software developer. Took a weird turn through intellectual property law, and then moved on to lead 3 of Toronto's Agile digital product studios, Architect, Wrangle, and TWG, which is now part of Deloitte Digital. And what was interesting while I was there is I saw the power of differentiation. When we were offering something different to the market, whether it was at Architect talking about the art of the possible, showing people what they could do in consumer experiences, or at Wrangle just being the leading experts in Angular and front-end technologies, things were really great. But then I also saw when the value of differentiation waned, when everybody could hire a skilled Angular developer, it was a little less meaningful and things didn't go so great. So that's where I first started to appreciate just how important it was to offer the market something uniquely valuable. And I took those lessons into Alchemist, which later became part of Eco Online. It's a health and safety software company, and when I was there, I led strategy and corporate development for North America. So I was looking at the product portfolio, identifying gaps and opportunities to serve the market uniquely well, and generally solve those gaps by acquiring software companies. So spent a lot of time on product. I focused on helping emerging B2B tech companies make a greater impact. So strategy that helps them set the aligned resources and win in the future, positioning that helps them reach the right prospects with the right messaging, and aligning teams on what success looks like and how it will be achieved. And that brings us to tonight and what I'll be talking about. First, we'll do this talk for about 30-35 minutes. Please raise your hand, ask any questions in the middle, but after that, there is a Q&A period if we need it. And then we'll do an exercise where hopefully you'll be able to apply a little bit of what I talk about tonight. So, what are we going to talk about? First, we'll talk about what is differentiated value. What does it really mean? Where does it come from? I'll use lots of examples. Why should we care about it? How important is it? What gets in the way of delivering it? Because I think everybody would. It's just a matter of there are systemic barriers. And then lastly, what can we do about it? So what can we do differently to help our organizations differentiate and be successful? So one of my favorite business quotes, every business is successful exactly to the extent that it does something others cannot. It's by Peter Thiel. If you don't recognize the name, he was the founder of PayPal, or one of the founders, and was its CEO when eBay bought them. Founder of Palantir, you see them in the news for reasons good and bad, and was the first outside investor in Facebook. He knows a lot about product and success. So what is differentiated value? Well, it's the reason people choose your offering over others. It's the value your offering gives customers that they care about, that they can't get anywhere else. If customers don't perceive differentiated value, they choose you based on price. And that isn't always a good thing. For instance, online small business accounting software. There's at least these 6 providers serving Canada right now. Anybody got any thoughts about how they differentiate from each other? Long story short, I have no idea either. So this is the result. They are all almost all heavily discounting, trying to win customers. That's the game now because of a lack of differentiation. But let's talk about something that's going a little better. Porter and Air Canada. So Porter talks about their elevated economy experience. It's premium economy service for everybody. Air Canada also has a valuable offering, which is they can pretty much get you anywhere in the world between them and their partner networks. You get baggage transfers, you get all the things you expect for international travel. And they both get a chance to be successful. But let's talk a little bit about Porter's success on this experience. Free drinks, free Wi-Fi, and just treating people like people is resulting in some pretty great results. They had 29 prop planes. They have added 33 jets in the last year flying out of Pearson, so really changing their business. And what does that really mean? Going from like 2,200 seats in 2023 to over 6,000. So they're almost tripling the business on the back of this elevated economy experience. And I guess the other thing I want to say about it is, actually, I'll get to it. And then lastly, you might think, hey, I work on an internal product, or I work in a charity. This differentiation stuff might not really apply to me. But it kind of does, because charities even have to compete for donations. They compete for the resources to help them fulfill their missions. We build systems that help them do that, whether it's trying to remove friction from the donation process. So in pretty much any organization, you can find a meaningful way that you can serve the business through products to help make it different and more successful in its objectives. So this is a list of the 2023 Technology Fast 50. It's the fastest growing tech companies in Canada. And you don't have to pick up every name on the list, but what I want to assure you is that every single company in this list is differentiated in some way. I'm going to ignore number 1. It's a blockchain gaming company. It's embarrassing that that's number 1. But let's jump into Noibu. So for each of them, I've said what it could have been and what it is that helped it achieve that success. So Noibu could have been general QA software, but instead they focused on checkout experiences for e-com. They do QA just for that experience. Their case study was helping a company fix $132,000 in checkout leakage in 1 week. So by focusing on that one unique little space, they've driven a ton of success. BioRender, a friend recently joined there. They're an incredible company. They could have been a generalized graphic design company, but instead they do scientific image and illustration. So if you're a researcher, instead of using PowerPoint, instead of using Canva, you're probably using BioRender. And then lastly, Rideco. Could have been another fleet management company, but instead they focused on last mile / on-demand trips. They actually have a lot of paratranspo and other contracts. So they've solved a very niche but important problem in the logistics space. So, and then just a little bit to hopefully motivate you to care even more about differentiation. This is a stat from Blue Ocean Strategy. And basically what it's saying is, if you had a choice between launching a feature into contested market space where people are already doing things, or you have a choice of launching into something new, something different. If you launch into the different area, you can expect 4 times more revenue and 10 times more profit on average. The market definitely rewards differentiation when it's valued. And then I'll use Apple smartphones as an issue. Apple actually only has 15% global market share for smartphones. We just prefer them in North America for the most part. But otherwise, about 85% of the market share is going to Android and maybe a couple other smaller players. But the profits are exactly inverted, meaning Apple will get 85% of all profit that is made on smartphones globally, even with that little bit of market share. So picking your niche. And I guess the other thing to share about Apple, they've tried to go down market. I remember them introducing all these colored models with less power years ago, trying to break into international markets. And every time they've tried, they've had to retreat. But focus has been the answer to success. And differentiated value comes from unique capabilities. Porter don't have to pay people to move bags between flights. They don't have to pay for all the overhead of dealing with lost luggage because, well, I guess maybe they have a bit, but at the end of the day, they are able to offer free Wi-Fi and free drinks because of the structure of their industry, because they've not had things like, they maintain 2 plane types instead of the 20 that Air Canada has. There's just a lot of overhead that would be in a lot of airlines that they don't have, and they translate that into a better offering. So you have to be capable of delivering something else and giving people something else that your competitors cannot. So whether it's free Wi-Fi and drinks, scientific image creation, or ease of donation, there's capabilities drive differentiated value. So what gets in the way of delivering differentiated value? Because we'd all want to. I think we hope to work on products and offerings that uniquely serve the market. First of all, a lot of companies actually don't have a strategy. They operate, they make reasonably good decisions. Their success is often tied to how sound their strategy is, but ultimately, you do run into a lot of companies that just are playing to play. They don't really do anything to differentiate themselves and win in the market. The strategy hasn't cascaded down, meaning the company has a strategy, but barely anybody in the company sees it, knows about it. A lack of alignment within the company, meaning there's a strategy, it's cascaded down, but people actually don't believe it works and they don't spend their time working on it. We can talk about all the things of change management, culture as well, but these are usually the major organizational challenges. But let's talk a little bit more about the ones that we can deal with in agile product teams. The product roadmap isn't aligned to the strategy, and I don't blame product management. I think usually it's just a matter of it not being really, like context not being set well enough, but we can ask for it. Prioritization treats all revenue equally, and that's one of the big things I see in our chat tonight. In Agile, we always talk about delivering value, but we don't often think about value beyond a revenue dollar and treat all revenue equally. So I'll elaborate a little more on that in a minute. And then prioritization overvalues customer feedback. And this is not me saying talking to customers isn't one of the most important things you can do, but I will elaborate a little in that sometimes they will lead you astray. So let's talk about the prioritization and some of the prioritization frameworks they use and how they often don't serve us. So this is RICE scoring, reach, impact, confidence over effort, and used to prioritize backlog items. It's pretty good. Impact could speak towards impact that includes differentiation, serving customers well over time, but in general isn't really part of the way people apply the model today. Same for Kano model, which speaks to delighters, speaks to performance, but often doesn't take that long-term view. Often delighters might be giving a customer a feature that a competitor has, and the customer's seen it and knows that they want it. Same for the Moscow method, must have, should have, could have, won't have. It also talks about prioritization, but doesn't really talk about how to prioritize and how to choose what should be a must, what is a must-have versus a should-have. Getting a little better, one of my favorite prioritization frameworks otherwise is cost of delay. I use it in organizations myself to figure out what to prioritize as an initiative. But again, the cost of delay is often expressed in terms of revenue or cost and a shorter term view that is focused on revenue that people will pay today. Usually these numbers are arrived at by extrapolating how much current customers will pay or how much the market will pay this year. And then lastly, weighted scoring. Also a really great model, but tends to focus on individual experience elements or sales elements, but not taking a long-term view of differentiation into account. So what's great about all these models is they lead to explicit prioritization of the backlog, which is a really great start. But the challenge is none of them really lead to you building uniquely valuable products. Without adding something, they will treat all value created as the same. So that can usually lead teams to build products that catch up to competitors rather than look at serving the market differently. So, and there's this quote attributed to Henry Ford. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. We should always look to understand customer needs and customer pain. But the catch is they're often not good at imagining how to solve their own problems. So, and the other thing they'll do is say that they'll act in ways, but then act in a completely different way when it comes time to buy. And Henry Ford didn't actually say it. Customer feedback. People pay more for legroom on a plane, right? Why don't you put your hand up? Would you pay more for legroom on a plane? All right. Now, have you ever, leave your hands, stay up please. Please keep it up if you've ever researched seat pitch in economy on flights when it came time to buy.
Exactly.
So American Airlines ran this experiment in 2000 because everybody said they'd pay more for legroom. And they basically made that investment for their whole fleet, taking up 2 to 3 rows of seats to give everybody 2 to 3 extra rows of legroom. Should have been a runaway success based on what customers were saying and expressed this preference. But 3 years later, they were undoing the experiment. It's treated as an industry failure. And while you could say September 11th and other factors may have come into play, basically airlines have been scared off the concept. They will just not buy into the fact that people will pay more for extra legroom now. So how can we do better? What can we do differently? My first advice, dealing with the earlier factors, seek to understand the strategy around your product. Not that you wouldn't have otherwise, but it's worth digging a little deeper than maybe you have in the past. I can't imagine working in a bank and trying to go to my director and say, how are we going to make our app different than everybody else's banking app? But I think the more you can ask, hopefully you can find the confidence to ask people, what are we really trying to achieve here? How are we trying to be different? You might get some answers that you weren't expecting, and maybe you'll lead the organization to give it a little more thought. Align your roadmap prioritization to the company and the strategy when it exists. But more importantly, this might result in you actually leading strategy development. I think it can be hard to imagine sometimes, but sometimes just starting to ask some really good questions can lead to your organization asking some meaningful questions if you handle it carefully. And I'm happy to take questions or talk to you about how to do this in your situation after the talk. If your product's performing well and you don't know why, find the reason. A lot of companies actually make good decisions. They make decisions that are moving the needle forward and offering people valuable without maybe coming up with strategy. But in that particular case, I would encourage you to actually explore what is working so you can double down on it. You can set a long-term course for delivering even more value to your clients over time. And then, most importantly for tonight, talking about the way that we tend to work, is factor the impact of differentiation into your roadmap prioritization. And I have 2 possible suggestions for doing that, which hopefully will help you or be close to what you need for your organization. The first is add the differentiation impact to your weighted scoring. So if you use the weighted scoring framework or adopt it, it can be added as a factor you consider. You can look at, for each thing in your backlog, how much will this differentiate our organization in this future? How much will it contribute to us offering our customers something uniquely valuable rather than just an extension of what all the other products are doing today? Option 2, just factor the impact of differentiation into your revenue projections. So let's say you're using cost of delay. I like this example I stole from the internet. Because it's easy to envision just saying Apple Pay integration maybe is worth $150K this year, but if we add it, it will distinguish us from the competition in a way that will pay off even more in years 2 and 3. So it's really just taking a longer term view of impact and trying to extrapolate what can be the impact of this competitively as opposed to just collecting revenue from customers. But there's a bit of a challenge with this one that I want to talk about, and leads me a little more towards the first one, which is sometimes it's combinations of features that differentiate you more. So for instance, when I worked in the health and safety software space, there's a lot of different combinations of safety company, but at the end of the day, on one end of the spectrum, you'll have manufacturing. Everybody tends to be on one site, handling chemicals, engaging in processes that can drive repetitive strain injuries, and sometimes you need chemical exposure monitoring. But focusing on those in-house safety experiences in high-risk industries was one angle that we considered. On the other hand, you've got mines, you've got oil workers, you've got remote nurses working in the field. So sometimes you have the other end of the spectrum where people are remote, and trying to serve both types of companies at a time is pretty hard. You're trying to develop features for two completely different audiences. So the main point of this is sometimes if you can build the right combinations of features together, that's what differentiates you and makes you super valuable to a company. So looking for ways of adapting your scoring to focus on those combinations can be super helpful. So for that reason, I generally recommend the weighted scoring and adding differentiation there, because when you score, it's a little easier to tweak your weights and your differentiation values to hopefully highlight the combinations a little better. I'm actually going to admit I don't have a perfect answer either. Those are just the two great solutions that I can come up with today. So, I'm not sure how I'm actually doing for time, but in summary, if there's things I want you to remember leaving here tonight, products should differentiate your business. At the end of the day, my view of a perfect world is one where every business is delivering something uniquely valuable to people instead of just trying to be another company delivering the same thing. Teams need to be aligned in strategy, or align the company to the strategy, but take the time to learn everything you can about your organization, your unit, your team strategy, and double down on it. And then lastly, enhance your prioritization by factoring in differentiation. So, I'm not saying all of you can go tomorrow and focus on this exclusively, but I hope that you find yourself in the circumstances where you can start leaning yourself more and more into helping your product team focus on how are we going to really make our unique, great impact in the world? How are we going to help our organization be more successful by standing apart from the competition and doing something different? All right, I will start with Mike.
So you were pointing out Porter, that they differentiated themselves in the form of enhanced economy experience, right? And but you're also saying that they changed they had a different business model and not having baggage people to change planes doing point to point and stuff like that, right? It just made me think of Southwest, because Southwest also, when they first came on the scene, their whole thing was, we have 737s, that's it. We don't have 10 different type of airplanes.
Exactly.
We have 737s, we have one cabin. We don't have business and economy, we have one cabin, that's it. But instead of enhancing the in-flight experience that Porter has done, they chose to take their differentiation in the form of lower costs and turn themselves into a low-cost carrier.
Yeah, Southwest are one of the great strategy cases of North America, and they see their competition as cars and people driving themselves to other places rather than other airlines. They do everything they can to drive their costs down so people will consider flying Southwest instead of loading up for a 10-hour road trip. So, but they serve the segments that they serve very well. They serve a very meaningful purpose for those who would rather, who don't care about their flight experience, but care about getting to a destination in a very cost-effective way. And they are the number 3 airline in the US in spite of the point-to-point flights instead of hub and spoke like United, and United's ahead of them, Delta's the leader, and American is behind them in terms of revenue. The gentleman behind Mike.
Thank you so much for the presentation. You spoke a bit about differentiation within the charities sector. I was wondering if you could just elaborate more on that, because I saw there was United Way, and then there was Cancer Society of Canada.
Yeah. So interesting thing is I used to be on the board of a very small charity, and then as well I serve a client who helps a lot of charities be more efficient. There's two big things that I see charities needing to do. The first is, removing friction from donations. The easier it can be, the easier it is on a website to donate. That's definitely a way that they can stand out. And then related to that, when I have excess stuff, I became a minimalist at Christmas. But I've been giving away tons of stuff. And I've learned that I go to Value Village. Not because I support their cause, which I think is the Canadian Diabetes Association, but because they come to my car with a bin, help me unload, whereas everybody else, I've got to ring a bell, try to get their attention, unload it myself. Sometimes I wait there like 5 minutes to get somebody to accept my donation. But even maybe more importantly is a lot of organizations that do charitable giving will put constraints on the administrative load of the charity. Like my charity often had to sign up to the fact that no more than 25% of its overall expenses went to administration. And charities tend to be people heavy and can't always afford the tech of everybody else. So the more charities can drive out administration, the more eligible and the admin costs with tech or other things, the more eligible they are for giving that helps them achieve their mandate. So charities regrettably have to compete. Does that answer your question? Okay, Tom?
Think about software specifically. Yeah. If you decided as a software company to differentiate your product by using something entirely different from the hamburger menu or other methods that people are familiar with, I suspect that you might run afoul of your potential customer base. How do you kind of keep the things that need to be in common, like the standards or emergent standards, while also differentiating your product?
So I think if I understand you right, it's you could differentiate in a way that they don't value and almost breaks your experience? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my view is that there are things that are expected of software, and particularly in a mobile context where there's only so much bandwidth you're going to get on that screen.
Right.
If you go too far down the road of differentiating, you're going to lose your audience.
Yeah. No. The term I used was differentiated value, meaning you're differentiating in a way that people value and care about. But you make a great point. A lot of people will think, hey, we're going to do this to be different. What's really important is to find the way to be different in a way that customers value greatly. Trying to think of great examples, but Apple, very greatly on user experience. Like, I have a computer science degree, I won't touch an Android. My wife has one. I just find every time I touch it, I don't know what to do. Whereas I've been able to use an Apple without any training or guidance or people pointing me to things. So, I think that would be my main answer is it's not enough to differentiate. You have to differentiate in a way that people care about and will pay a premium for.
Elaborate on ways you found to help organizations find the differentiation strategy.
Yeah, so in essence, I shared that capabilities are often the root of it. In both product and services organizations, it often comes from what sets them apart. So for instance, with one, they're a chemical safety software company, but what really sets them apart is a founder who had industrial hygiene experiences and embedded that throughout his product. What differentiates his organization is it's one that has tools for people who proactively want to manage safety from chemical hazards, that will go above and beyond the legal requirements to educate their staff about how to handle them safely. He provides safer substitution tools so that people can look at their inventory, flag the most hazardous stuff, and actually see viable options for replacing it. So it usually is a matter of looking at the organization, its capabilities, its past work, and everything from qualitative calls with customers, like, hey, what do you value about this relationship? The data of product usage, like that same customer thought that people really value charts that can be printed on the wall with safety information. But the reality is, in a lot of organizations, they can't use them because every time they use a chemical, it's in a different way. They'd be wasting paper printing it off. So looking at data, it was helpful for him to see that people really valued the approval process and the safer substitutions, not being able to print a poster. So, and then in services organizations, it's often looking at what work they've done, what they can do better than any other service organization. So I mentioned I worked at Architect Rangel and TWG. In each of those, I had to find what do we do better than everybody else? Because at the end of the day, we all had the same capabilities as a baseline of software development, project management, agile delivery. It was really looking for those specialized experiences where we could do something different. In one place it was looking at leading and almost leading technologies, knowing how to apply them to consumer experiences. Another was front-end development and having a great pedigree for doing that. And another was product management, back at a time when people really didn't know how to go from 0 to 1 on a product. So almost all of them have it. Almost all of them have a founder who started the company because there was something they wanted to do differently than everybody else. So often it's just getting back to their roots of what got them to start in the first place and what skills they've developed that their competitors haven't emphasized.
What's your point of view, or to what degree does differentiated value have to stay the same? Should companies be looking for differentiated value and like just playing into the factor of first mover advantage versus then someone else comes out with a similar solution? Like, what's the trajectory or?
Yeah, I think strategically you have to look for not only where you can build an advantage, but where you can keep it. And historically, first movers haven't done very well. Often they end up over-investing and can be copied. So you usually want to find the sweet spot of moving the state of the art in your business for a segment of customers rather than moving the state of the art for everybody. Often you don't want to be the big investor in the unknown. You want to be the fastest applicator of the starting to be understood. So I think, yeah, in strategy, it's often about building capabilities that others will have trouble reproducing. I have one client, for instance, they have a partnership with a technology provider. It would be really hard for others to start focusing on customized or configurable software in the way that they have. And they've kind of nailed the onboarding process and hiring process for who's going to be good at applying configurable software to improve business processes. And now they're taking that and extending it into other areas because they know it's hard for people to specialize there. The custom software development studios won't get into it because they know how to hire developers. And yeah, it should be a reasonably good area where their specialization can continue to serve them well, so long as they stay ahead of what technologies people are actually ready to deploy to be more efficient. So,
thank you.
Capabilities.
With his question, I'm just wondering, like companies, if they have a unique value that will give them profits that they are expecting, but how often do you think that they should revisit their?
Revisit?
Yeah.
No, perfect. Honestly, quarterly. So I work with clients and tech changes fast. I worked with one client in Ottawa and they have to be constantly innovating and looking at their value proposition compared to other competitors in their space. And with other clients, we've implemented generally quarterly cycles of just saying, hey, is our strategy sound? Is our positioning sound? And most quarters, it's, yeah, we can leave it alone. But every once in a while, we're like, no, this competitor's added these few features. One competitor in that space, they were able to charge a very significant price premium on the back of offering something uniquely valuable. But now we've seen that a competitor has decreased their prices a little and increased their functionality a lot, to the point where my client needs to innovate a little further. They have to go a little deeper on what's made them successful so far to keep that lead and where they have it, and not let the competitors encroach in. Customers are aware and customers are price sensitive. So if you're charging more on the basis of doing something different, it has to be pretty different and pretty valuable, and you have to preserve that. So the short answer is, unfortunately, constantly. There's no resting in tech.
Based on your experience, what differentiates the leadership teams? What makes them the best positioned to take advantage of differentiation and how they work and how they introduce products to them?
Yeah, it's funny. Most of my work is giving them the confidence to niche down. So ultimately, most people start a company because they've seen a problem that they don't think others are solving or solving as well. But then growth happens, they start hiring a little bit ahead of business, and all of a sudden they have to broaden the business out. And that actually has the opposite effect of what they intend. Instead of helping it grow, it actually makes it less differentiated and a little harder to run. So to answer your question, what makes the teams different? It's usually either pure courage to niche and serve people uniquely well and let that play out as it will, or a solid data analytical leadership team that can look at where they are, where they can better serve people. So one of my clients, they were doing very well, but all of a sudden realized that a key partner feeding them a lot of revenue was basically they were too dependent on one partner. And they hired a financial guy, and he's just a catalyst for change. And he brought me in to help. Another case is a founder who realized that he just wasn't realizing what the gains that he wanted to and knew he had to do something different. So usually if a business isn't differentiated, it's either some trigger event of realizing that they want to keep feeding their teams and helping their people grow and they can't do it anymore, or they just always have had the courage and conviction of what they're doing and uniquely serving the market. Hope that answered your question well. I think the other answer to your question is what makes the teams different. It's usually the willing to defy convention, because it's really easy to do the same thing that everybody else is doing. It's really hard when you have to stand behind your conviction of, I'm going to serve the market this way, and I know people don't get it yet, but it's the dreamers. The leaders, right? Tom?
How do you avoid falling into the trap that American Airlines fell into with their legroom gambit, where their data showed this, all the interactions with their customers and polling and so forth, and instinctively it makes sense. Everyone complains about the lack of legroom, but it was an abject failure. So how do you steer clear of that?
Yeah, I wish a researcher was here to answer it a little better, but I think one of the key things that we've learned is that it is good to run tests that really cause people, really test people's behavior, and then it matches what they'll say they're going to do. And usually the best indicator of what people value is money. So maybe they should have tested certain flights or certain ranges and taking a few rows out, or reselling the techniques that we've learned for seeing if people will pay for something in advance and applying them early. So I think, they suffer from doing that about 23 years ago, and the knowledge of data and doing solid research maybe not being quite as strong. But other times you gotta make bets, and people have the capital to do it. So short answer, sometimes you can do the analysis. I don't know how people invest in big manufacturing plants, like the math behind that, and the reality is I don't think they know any better than anybody else, even with sophisticated models. We always read in the news about busts, so can you always avoid it? No. Sometimes it's just making a bet.
I want to ask about accountability.
Okay.
And I know you mentioned it's a differentiated value, it's also related to strategy, cascading, but what is your say, where does the main accountability lie?
I think all organizations will vary. I saw a really great Marty Kagan, product manager guru. He was talking the other day about the fact that you should give product teams problems. So the leadership team, the executive team should decide what the bets that the organization wants to make are. The product team should be given the bet. So give them the parameters of what the organization would hope to achieve with a bet, and then leaving the product team to do the discovery, the user analysis, all the work to build a product that tests, is this bet viable? So it'd be a bit of shared accountability because the product team could theoretically not make the most of the bet or the opportunity, and the exec team could come up with really dumb ideas. So I think it's just a matter of blame doesn't really help anybody. It's just trying to create alignment, creating an alignment of what the organization's trying, what it thinks will work, and the fact that it's experimenting with things. So healthy organizations will be able to operate on bets. Unhealthy ones are going to point fingers sometimes, and hopefully you're not the one at the end of the game of musical chairs. But in general, product teams ideally would have the room to explore a problem space, to say, hey, if we're in health and safety, how are we going to better serve the companies that are doing manufacturing like the in-house stuff? And we will let the other things slide. We will accept the fact that people who run mines won't pick us anymore.
Yeah, sure. When you say product differentiation, right? So would your focus be more towards, let's say, small number of high-paying customers or large number of low-paying customers? Like, will you do more enhancement, let's say, for example, on Lamborghini more or a Honda Civic?
My answer is you should pick one. And the main reason I say that is there are different models that work. And I will talk about my personal experience. I won't name the company, but I worked in one that was trying to serve all three of them at once. I was trying to serve entry-level customers, mid-market, and enterprise. And I had a CEO who was one of my best friends, but was convinced we could serve them all equally well. And we professionally fight a lot, but in a very healthy, we go have beer afterwards kind of way. But I believe that organizations need to achieve an efficiency with who they try to reach and who they need to serve. I've never seen an organization that can really serve all three tiers particularly well. And when they are, they're the apples. They're the ones with global resources, more money than they know what to do with. Pretty much every other organization has to pick a segment and win in it. So I don't have a specific recommendation of one versus the other. I just say an organization needs to pick one strategy. Mr. Tobin.
Because I'm interested in consulting service examples, what differentiates Kingston Co, or maybe you're still trying to get a handle on that. If you've got other consulting examples, that's
Yeah, no, very happy to answer it because I couldn't do it for myself. What differentiates me is I do positioning and strategy for tech companies in that $1 to $5 million revenue range, looking to grow beyond it. I help companies that are going from what I'll call nascent product fit. There's some really great product fit models out there that I've never seen before this month, but going from the one where they have 5 to 10 customers, 500K to $1 million revenue to the next step requires very specific things, going from founder figuring a new offering every time they sell something to something repeatable. And I've been through that. So what makes me differentiated? I'm serving a space where my experience is uniquely valuable. And I've walked the path before, so I can help other people take the right steps for them. So, whereas other strategy consultants, like actually the other day, somebody we both know offered me a referral to somebody outside the tech space. I said, no thanks, because I'm gonna waste time talking to them and they will probably choose somebody at a lower price point to just run them through strategic facilitation. If you can't benefit from my experience, you probably don't want to pay me. And with that, follow me on LinkedIn for more insights like this, and at kingston.co/insights, you'll be notified every time I write a longer form piece on things like this. But that is it for me. Thank you for your time and attention.